Ladies and gentlemen, in just a moment you are going to hear the voice of a man who will tell you some tremendously important facts.
Welcome to the Reality Revolution. This is a super fantastic day for the Reality Revolution. We're taking it to the next level. We have the one and only Kyle Cease. And before I go through his bio and everything, I just want to take this first opportunity to thank Kyle. In many ways, I don't think I would have this channel without Kyle, because at the beginning of my channel, I was so afraid to post any episodes, and I was so afraid to take that chance, to take that step, to listen to my heart. And I listened to Kyle and read his book, and I realized, you know what, I need to stop worrying about what other people think. And I was able, and gave me the courage to take that next step. So thank you. And if you don't know who Kyle Cease is, he's after 25 years of achieving what he thought was his dreams of being a headlining touring comedian and actor, Kyle Cease suddenly discovered the belief when something happens, I will be happy, is a complete lie. Following the calling of his heart, he decided to quit his stand-up career at its peak, and now as a transformational comedian and New York Times best-selling author, 2 amazing books that we are going to go over, The Illusion of Money. They're all amazing. He brings one of a kind wisdom to his sold-out audiences, his Evolving Out Loud live stage show, and reaches millions online. He's made more than 100 different TV and movie appearances, including 10 Things I Hate About You, Not Another Teen Movie, Jimmy Kimmel Live, The Late Show with Craig Ferguson, Chelsea Lately, Martin Short Show, and numerous VH1 shows. And he's got an amazing YouTube channel. There's so much. Thank you so much for coming on, Kyle. It's an honor.
I'm really honored to hear you say that, because I had no idea till I just met you now that you knew who I was, other than the interview request. And I had been watching you for a while and just thought this stuff was fantastic that you were doing. And to hear like I was involved with the start of it without even knowing that is, or at least encourage some permission in you to release whatever was holding you back from that, is incredible. So, because your channel's insanely huge too. It's impactful, and it's, I mean, am I right? You're at 400,000 YouTube followers, right?
I think it's somewhere around that right now, but.
Wow. Well, good job, man. I'm really honored to be on the show with you and see what unfolds with you.
Well, thanks for coming on. My favorite thing is to talk to comedians, and to talk to a comedian that loves spirituality at the same time. It's like double whammy. It's amazing. So because I have several friends that are comedians. It's an absolute science, and it's a wonderful thing. And I can see that you've taken a lot of what you've learned as a comedian into this stage, and it's completely unique and different.
At one point, I think that I really thought, without understanding, I thought that at first who I was a comedian, because I was on stage really young. And, I was doing clubs, between 12 and 14, I was kind of already working, and then headlining at 18. And that was like my development as far as my identity. Like I knew who I was as a comedian before I knew who I was as a person. And it's interesting because I did that for quite a while and observed so many things, and your life is seeing so many things and discovering so many things. And then after I left that, which, as you said, is really true. Like one huge thing I noticed was the illusion of when something happens, I'll be happy. Like all of us are almost needing some kind of hope for the future or anticipation. And then it comes and we're like, so what? Like even just going to a restaurant, oh, I can't wait to get there. And it's like, once the food gets there, it's like, that's all right. It's good. But it's like, there's always this thing that when something happens, I'll be happy. And the entertainment industry kept feeding that, when the next movie comes, when the next gig comes, whatever. And that shift was, once I noticed, many of us weren't happy. And the more we achieved, the more we weren't happy. And there was quite a shift in myself when I started realizing the truth is, and this was my shift then, it's gotten much more exciting now, but it's actually when I'm happy, things will happen. And I started getting that, any illusion of something outside of you completes you is already a lie. It implies I'm incomplete. And so that started this revelation that was a first phase of just letting go of anything that felt vibrationally heavy, even if it looked good on paper or it could bring in a bunch of money or whatever. If I found my vibe thinking, ugh, I don't want to do this, like, you know, even if it was something that you should do, or it's the next step for your career, or someone else would advise it, if I listened to that calling that said either yes or no within 2 seconds, and just followed it, even if it made no sense, it always led me to some kind of way higher frequency. And now I just believe it's not even when I'm happy things will happen. It's just I'm here to connect with myself, or I'm unfolding. I almost don't even think there's an I anymore. I'm moving to this unfolding place where any feeling of limitation, any feeling of fear, any feeling of anything is a pattern that you learned. And the more I do this work, the more I understand that there isn't anything that feels vibrationally heavy about ourselves that's actually us. And when we're even triggered by something on the external, whatever it is, we're under the illusion that it's that thing. But if that was the case, every person would be triggered by the same thing. We'd all 100% agree on the same president or the same, you know, city or whatever, but we're always so triggered. But it's because it's bringing up something that's unseen in you. So the last 10 years have been just discovering in both me and other people, anything that feels triggering about something is actually trying to show you something deeper. And then once you see it and are there for it, it dissolves. And you realize that every belief you had, every pattern you had during that couldn't be you, because it leaves and you're still here. Right? If you're like really missing an ex and you're like, this is me, I'm going to always be like this or whatever. And then you cry it the right way, or you release it the right way, and it dissolves and you still exist. That means you weren't that story, which means you are no story. Right? So I've been so much more fascinated by my own evolving, and I'm realizing I don't even get to run it anymore. It's just kind of happening, and my job is to get out of the way. You asked a question at the beginning, or you started setting that up, and I don't even remember. I just started on a tangent and then was like, I can't remember what how this ties into what you said. But
the unique thing that you know, when we read any, you know, spiritual teacher, the unique thing that you've experienced that you share that I resonated with was, and I think you could only really get it as a comedian, is that you had defined yourself by other people loving you, you know, hey, I you know, and you tell that story in your first book about, you know, you somebody said you're starting a cult, and how that affected you and your own view of yourself, and you had lived your whole life like based on how many likes, how many people are liked you, and when you had that transformation where you realized it wasn't about the love you were getting, it was the love you were giving. That's a profound part of your first book.
That was the big shift. And then the bigger part of the shift is once you discover what that truth is, you have to live in alignment with that new world. And so it's very easy to have a breakthrough and then just go back to the habits, when the breakthrough was like a portal to a new world and saying, now go in here. So yeah, there were different stages of awakening that I had. And the first one was just kind of a motivational stage where I'd been a stand-up comic and just, you know, been touring so much and got exhausted and developed stage fright after 15 years. And I was at a headlining position, and I just started thinking all these sabotaging thoughts, and then, you know, got suicidally, you know, depressed. And, you know, I thought basically this is kind of stupid, but I just thought, I wonder if you can think about it enough if you could make yourself faint. And I got dizzy, and then I worried about it because you can't not think about something. And this got worse and worse. And then I got this fear that I would faint on stage. And then it transcended to, I'm scared that I'll faint when I do Comedy Central and it'll ruin my career. And that was when I discovered way later that my identity is I'm a comedian, because like if I faint while I'm on stage, I won't be loved, right? So the first stage was kind of into a motivational stage. I got really into Tony Robbins, and it moved me in a first stage from suicidal anxiety to #1 Comedy Central special in 2006. Like, it was a crazy special. And then I got into the motivational stage, which I'm not in now in the same way. And this was where you're in this place really developing when something happens, I'll be happy. And I was just making things happen. I was winning competitions and being number one and just having crazy sets and everything and performing stand-up. Now, in that stage that a lot of people are in, that achiever stage, that make it happen stage, which is an important stage to go through, one of the illusions is I am what I achieve. And if there's certain levels where you're going to have to release control, and that's what takes you to the next stage. So you're basically still a victim to your circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
You're just running them. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, you're making them all number one, but still there's some energy that says if they were to collapse, like you can learn how to motivate yourself into having $10 million, but you're still implying you're limited to who I am as my money. Like, you're just making it big, but still if it collapsed, you'd be nothing in your body, right?
Right.
So the next stage that you're talking about was the big awakening. This was huge. And that's where I ran a thing where I was kind of a motivating comedian that wanted other comedians to know they could do this. And I partnered with the late great comedian Louis Anderson, and we started teaching aspiring comics how to do this. So I became like a Tony Robbins in the comedy world while I was also a comic. And I thought obliviously that every single comedian would be so excited we're doing this. And I forgot that often comics, were cynical about stuff and were calling BS on everything. And many peers of mine that were comics that weren't coming to see what I was doing suddenly thought I was crazy and a cult leader and everything. And one day I was sitting with Louis Anderson and I said, I really want to get over what people think about me. And Louis Anderson very sweetly said, maybe it's your father. and I didn't know. And I went to my hotel room and I was about to get into a car that was going to take me to the airport. And I went to my hotel room and there was a comedian that wrote me a thing that said, hey, you con man. I got an email. It said, I read this blog this guy wrote about you. And this is like 12 years ago, but this comedian had written a blog about me that didn't know what I was doing, didn't see it, and just spelled out how I must be scamming people for money because you can't teach people comedy. And really what my aim was to just show people how with a massive, incredible work ethic showing up, your voice will show up. And then showing people their own authenticity, what their real insecurities were, is something that could be funny. But when he wrote this blog at the time, it went viral and comics were sharing it. And I had just said, I want to get over what people think about me. And now I'm facing like a ton of comedians attacking me. And I had enough training in me to know, don't go in the car and go to the airport. I'm about to learn something new. But I was horrified because I had known how to motivate my circumstances big. But what happens when something that seems bigger than you happens? This is where you have to release control, right? This is where all your power is, in my opinion, right? But I didn't know that then. So here's this comic writing this blog. These comics attack me, and I'm suddenly getting flooded with hate mail. Like, you must be scamming people as you're doing this boot camp thing. And I wasn't even making money doing it too. I was like, it was not bringing in money and everything. It was funny that I was getting that. And I told the car to go without me, and I decided to take the week off and stay in the hotel. And so I just sat with my emotions. And for the first 4 days, I watched as my emotions were picturing all these kind of achiever comebacks. I'll have another #1 special. I'll show them with a big thing. And then on day 4, I noticed that my mind was just continually coming up with achievement and saving its life while I've been fine in a hotel room. Like, I'm totally safe, but my mind is chiseling, reacting to thoughts, not what's happening. I mean, the comics weren't in the room beating me up. I was just in my body. I'm noticing my thoughts are, I'll do this and I'll do this. And there was this moment where my thoughts separated from me, and I saw the thoughts were over here just doing this thing. And I'm just a dude on a bed. I've been safe on a bed for 4 days in a hotel room. And something in me was like, these thoughts aren't me. And I just remember feeling like the awareness that it's having a panic attack, not me. It is some other aspect that isn't me. It was like the first moment of this separation from my thoughts. And so I'm just watching these things go, and I just realized none of that was me. And then all of my accomplishments, all of my problems, all of my past, all of my worries, everything just collapsed. And I just was now. And I was sitting in a hotel room just staring at the wall. And it was a better feeling than any accomplishment I had ever had. And I was just feeling totally free. And then that, whenever you have a breakthrough, it's like, that's the new mark that I want to feel. Like that's, you know what I mean? It suddenly beats like getting the best job or best relationship or more money. It's just like, what the hell was that? Like I just found another planet, you know, and I want to know what that was. So from that state, all of a sudden, I started feeling a new bliss that was amazing. And I noticed that motivation to achieve anything actually felt like a vibrational drop from this place. It was like, I'm implying this thing is bigger than me. So I just felt here. And then the big shift I made to honor this new feeling was I decided I want to know what would happen if I let go of things in my life that are heavy, things in my life that are vibrationally out of alignment with me. So the first thing I decided to do that just called to me, because I was always curious what would happen, was to go 90 days eating only raw vegan food. This isn't a pitch for raw veganism.
Right.
I think I just wanted to know what happened if all I ate wasn't, cooked in oil, wasn't, from animals' pain, wasn't from anything, just what would happen if I went 90 days. And to make sure I did it, kind of a Tony Robbins quote is, get on the island and burn the boats. I announced to my audience, I'm going to eat raw vegan for 90 days. If I eat anything cooked or animal product, I'll give away $10,000. This was my way of getting on the island and burning the boats, right? I'm now stuck doing this. And I had a friend that joined me in it. He was filming documentaries and stuff. And I said, what would would you like to do this with me? And he was like, yeah. And so for 90 days, the first 30 days I ate raw vegan, and I thought this was just going to be about my health. And at first it was, my health was getting crazy. But I remember this moment where on like day 30, someone walked by me with a hot dog. And I remember just smelling chemicals and metal. And I noticed that my taste buds changed. Like 30 days before, that would have been tempting. And now it was like separate from me. It was heavy energy that I wouldn't want. So I started going like, what else? And I was like, okay, what if I was like no Facebook for a while? And then I was like no dating for a while. And I just kind of started like letting go of things that didn't feel like aligned for me. And I remember saying something to Diego, like, what if I let go of Facebook? And I remember him saying, he said this was his quote, but he said, remember, when you let go of something, your mind can only measure what you lose. It can't see what you'll gain. And this blew my mind. When we let go of something, we're only looking at what we're losing, and we don't ever understand what we're gaining. So when you're going through a breakup, you're focused on the loss of one person versus the gain of 7.9 billion people if you're bisexual and willing to date everybody. But like there's a you that's under an illusion when you're looking at what you're letting go of. But you can always, this is what I learned too, you can always feel when you let go of something that there's always this thing where you go, like for instance, you have this calling in your body, it shows up and it's just based on feeling. What if I let go of this job? And whenever you have this thing, it's a calling, it's kind of exciting, it's expansive, you can feel this permission. But it can't tell you why because you've never done it. So you're actually literally moving based on faith. You're moving based on the feeling. And then always when this shows up, with everything in your life, whether it's moving towards something, letting go of something heavy, letting go of a relationship that doesn't work for you, moving toward deciding to fly to Italy or write your book or let go of everything, meditate, whatever, just whenever you do this, this is a higher calling. If it shows up in your body first, that calling that says, what if this happens, that inspired moment, it's always met by a second voice. That's the old story panicking and coming up with the counter to it. So this first voice will be like, I've used this as an example before, but this first voice, what if we leave this company? And then the second voice comes up with a specific reason that you can see that you shouldn't. And it's always so stupid. It's like, well, if we do, we can't go to the Cheesecake Factory party next Thursday. And the first voice is like, dude, you need to learn to listen to me, because when you listen to this, you start to learn to follow a feeling without evidence, and then insane evidence that's bigger than you've ever seen always shows up. Always. It's way bigger than you've ever seen. And then the mind is coming in with the, yeah, but they have those Thai lettuce wraps, and you're going to want to eat the Thai lettuce wraps. I always give as an example, if you've ever wanted to leave a relationship, but you don't, because, you know, at one point the two of you are going to go camping, you know what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Or we're going to go to this concert or something, right?
Yeah. It's like, I hate this person, but we already bought the tent. Right. So I'll wait 2 months and then hate him in the woods. Right. And like this second voice, what I've learned is when you follow, like, this is the opportunity voice and this is the fear voice. And when you follow the opportunity, the fear literally goes away. It's like jumping off the plane when you're skydiving. It's like, okay, the second you jump, you can't go back. People talk about the scariest moment on a plane is when they're looking over the side. Right. But that's when you're still safe. Like they always, yeah, once I'm hurling through the air at 10,000 miles an hour, I'll be fine. So this first voice is like taking you to a portal to a new world. And it's amazing how good this voice is at stopping you from following. This voice does stuff like, well, we've already been through this before, right at the helm of a breakthrough. Or it's like, no one will ever, it's so good. It's trying to keep an old pattern alive. That's an old timeline. That's an old egoic timeline. That's an old story. And the second you follow this thing it gets smaller or it dies. Mm-hmm. If you follow this, the opportunity dies. When you have an opportunity show up that expands your soul, and this thing that comes in that says, yeah, but if you follow it, you're now a person who does this. If you follow the yeah, but this dies, the calling dies, and you move more into the small story of what you are, which is usually based on the story you created in your childhood. The traumas that you avoided in your childhood often becomes the identity. Like I got yelled at by my dad, for instance, so I need to figure out what I need to do to never do that again. So you become quiet, or you become this, shy person. Then you think that's you, and you've created a false identity. And the two identities are the true unfolding you versus your childhood story, what you need to do to not get hurt. Mm-hmm. And I really believe that, like in the Two Earths Dolores Cannon's talking about, that's what that is. And this is why I believe for what's going on in the world right now, the number one thing you can do is not get too caught in fighting the matrix. It's leaving the matrix.
Yes.
And people, I'll say these things. They'll be like, don't you know what they're doing? And the blah, blah, blah. I totally do. But I'm not going to fix it by staying at the same frequency as it. Yes. And avoiding my own triggers by being mad at Bill Gates all day. I have to release that. Keanu Reeves didn't leave the Matrix and then stare in it all day. He learned
exactly. Yes.
Thing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so our expansion is the most important thing. I think it's everyone has their own role, and anyone going to protest stuff is awesome and needed. But there are many people that are at a frequency that's calling them even past the level of just fighting it at the level, right? We want 100 million Martin Luther Kings, not 100 million Martin Luther King followers.
Yes.
Right.
It's like, and I relate to this so much, and maybe it's because we're both talking about the changes on this planet, but It's like we're constantly being given two choices, and sometimes it's a constant choice between the old Earth and the new Earth, Earth, new Earth. I start to identify it as soon as I wake up. This is the old Earth option I have, and then there's this wonderful new Earth option that I have, and it's just so true. We're constantly making this choice. And, I see people that understand the new Earth concept, but they get caught up in conspiracies or whatever else is happening in the world, which is all old Earth stuff. Right.
And it's so good that some people are getting that awakening, because some people don't even know that. Right. So obviously, if you're just hearing only motivation, spiritual stuff, and you don't know any of this happening, like then you wouldn't have the drive to do it because you're just kind of complacent enough in your circumstances. But what's so beautiful about 2020 and beyond to me is that in 2019, we had enough of our circumstances the way we wanted them to not have to look within. We had enough, at least in certain countries. I understand that I'm not speaking for every country, but there were people that had enough egoic fulfillment that I have a just good enough job or mediocre enough relationship, and I can travel anywhere I want and can eat whenever I want, that like 2020 broke all of our patterns. It took our ability away to just like go to the same restaurant or whatever. And even though obviously there's certain things that we all know about, or many of us in our field know about, what's going on with the masks and everything, I kind of felt like when you go to a silent retreat, like you're just silent and you don't talk for 10 days. I'm suddenly going into the store and I'm on a 2-year silent retreat, right? Like I'm
right.
just, I'm like in my own, I'm not encouraging this or saying this is the medical thing. I'm saying like, instead of me looking at what the government's doing, I'm looking at what God's doing and the universe is doing here. And it's getting us to find ourselves. It's getting us to awaken, but not only awaken to what's going on in the external, because all the darkness that's coming up on the external is also coming up on the internal. And we've lived at a level of motivation that was about think positive while avoiding the negative inside of us. And so we're all thinking positive. We're all in this optimistic place, but we have pain inside. So if I go into a garage that's pitch black with you and I just shine a flashlight on the positive, but I'm ignoring the fact that there's also a dead body in the other corner and there's a bunch of rats on it, we're not seeing the whole thing. Now imagine what God did in 2020 was turn the whole garage light on. And now you're looking at, oh, this is also here. Because you'll notice now people talk in this way like, something's coming up for me. Like this is every person every other day now. I'm releasing something. We didn't talk like that in the 90s.
No. Well, yeah. And you eventually you start to smell the body. You think you can forget about that negative stuff, but eventually it's going to come up in your environment anyway. You've got to get rid of the body or do something about it. You got to address this thing that's happening. And a lot of in 2019, it was easy for us just to ignore it or push it down and forget about that darkness, because we could be blinded by the positivity that we were moving towards, right? So yeah, just we get blinded a little bit by the light. If you go to 2019, what was happening is it was easy for us just to focus on that aspect. But eventually the darkness always comes up. It's always playing a role unless we face it and deal with it. It doesn't just go away by ignoring it.
Inside of us and externally. Like it's weird. Isn't it weird to everyone watching? Isn't it weird that you're noticing all these things about you, old patterns, dark things that you're having to forgive or let go of, or realizing the same time you're hearing all this stuff about the media and the government and everything? Like, isn't that weird? Don't you think the world is mirroring you? This is a mirror of you. As your darkness comes up, same with the external. You learn all this stuff about politicians and stuff, and it just keeps coming up, right? And what's weird is that it's like the most famous story of the last 3 weeks, and I don't even mean to talk about it, but it's an insane example of why, if you only think of the positive, the negative staying buried, is the Will Smith slap of Chris Rock. Because I don't mean to go to it.
Oh, please do. Yeah.
But for 20 years, I've heard Will Smith talking positivity. He's just motivation, just everything's, if you're just motivation and you're fed, you got another giant movie, you got this thing. So you're getting the rewards that make the motivation not have to make you go deeper, right? Because you keep getting the reward that you don't have to look any deeper. So you can keep being in the chase, keep being a #1 actor, keep making this, getting all the love externally. Even with that much now in this time, it's kind of amazing. Your darkness is going to still come up when you can't even control it.
Every time, yeah.
At the Oscars, you're not even doing it subtly. You're
self-sabotage on the grandest stage, right?
Right. And this isn't even a judgment to him.
No.
The world did that enough. But like what this is going like everyone, this is a time where only thinking positive is going to be really painful, because the darkness is just coming up, and we need to go from high because of the positive thinking to here. Right? We've lived in a state that I like to call jackpot high. But if you look at that on a microscopic level, you look at someone in Vegas who's trying to hit jackpot all the time. They're sitting there for 12 hours on the slot machines, and their hope for a giant thing is making them live there. We need to leave Las Vegas. We need to find out who we are and be with ourselves right now, because in the now, the now contains also the dark energy too, and loves all of it. It sees all of it. And that's what's trying to show. We've, especially in America, we've been so trained, you are what you achieve. And so we lived in the future, and we constantly just thought the only thing that mattered is money. That's dying. And that's good, because that's not the truth. That thing that you are identified with since you form memory still isn't the truth of what you are. And this is why meditation and connecting to the now is so vital, because if you listen to the now, it's going to help you release the lie of the false you that you've created since birth, or was forced on you since birth.
Big part of your journey has been this other self. If I were to translate what we've gone through so far, is that you had the little self that you were battling with, and then that moment in the hotel, it was this other self, this greater self, the neutral observer that's there, that knows better, that knows more. It's attaching to that wisdom of it, right?
I'm realizing I even forgot to finish that story. But the biggest part of that was when I started letting go. I'm sorry to go back to that, but if you want to hear the rest of it real quick, I kept just letting go of things that were heavy. And on day 45 or so, I think it was around that, I was about to go do a week at a comedy club. And this is after I'd been a headlining comic forever. And I just felt this feeling like, oh, I don't want to. And I noticed that from starting with eating raw vegan, I went up a frequency that was so high that it was higher than my dream career. And now my dream career of going to go do a comedy club started feeling heavy. So I was with my friend Diego, and I just felt this feeling. I'm done doing stand-up comedy. I don't want to do it anymore. The next week I would have been in a comedy club. And instead I was at home moving up vibrationally as I was just letting go of thing after thing after thing, where I started noticing I'm now someone who doesn't even need my dream career anymore. Like, I'm like, in a good way, I mean this not in an egoic way, I'm even bigger than that. Like, you're even bigger than the biggest dream you have in your life. You're bigger than any dollar you've made. You're bigger than every relationship. Like, these are all byproducts of you. I'm not saying the other person isn't as bad. I'm just saying like that this accomplishment is a byproduct of you. And we get excited about the thing versus that it came from us, right? Which is so crazy.
Yeah.
So I said, I'm done doing comedy clubs on the road. The next week, I remember being at home and feeling so connected to source. Like, it was just nuts. And I felt this voice go, what if you combined comedy and transformation? And I remember the egoic voice in me was way quieter than the calling voice now. And it goes, no one's ever done that like this way you want to do it. And then my soul was like, no one's ever done that. Like, the reason you think you can't is the reason you have to.
Right.
So it's like, what I want to do, I can feel this idea of like my own transformation being comedic. And I got really excited about not becoming a teacher on the external, like I have all the answers, but I have all the questions. My events are called Evolving Out Loud because I'm evolving myself. Every advice I give is for me. Like, have you ever given someone advice and then you learn from the advice?
Every episode I do where I'm teaching myself. It's a teach learning experience every time, right?
Right. Like, sometimes you give people advice they're not even asking.
Right.
Like they're like, I have a stomach ache. And you go, I think you should break up with her. Like, and you realize that's not what they were asking, and they're single. You're like, oh, I'm talking to myself. So if there's a you that gives advice and then there's a you that learns from it, that means there's two of you.
Yeah.
This is weird.
There's weird.
Me that feels that calling, and then a me that's following the calling. And this is the two voices, right? So I am able, because of this revelation, to do content anytime, like every day, like,
Right.
and what happened was I was like, what if I combine comedy and transformation? I had my friend come and record me making an intro video for every college that I did, almost every book, like 500 bookers for colleges that I performed at before, by name. So literally I made 500 videos for colleges. Like, hey, this is for Diane Johnson at North Idaho University. This is Kyle Cease. I performed as a comic. I want to do the lecture circuit and teach transformation comedically. And I remember that week comedians going, what happened to you? Why aren't you doing a club? Like, go do that and go make whatever $3 to $5 grand or whatever. Then a ton of those colleges said yes at like, almost 10,000 a pop. And I'm now making way more to fly out and do one gig and say exactly what I feel and be in alignment with myself and go back. So that was a great example of when you let go of something, you can measure what you lose. You can't see what you'll gain. And then after that, I had a big agency that was not a fan of me doing the transformation until they started seeing the money. They weren't a fan of me doing they wanted me to go back to comedy, but they still were taking 10% of these gigs and they had nothing to do with it. And I started feeling they were out of alignment, but they were one of the biggest agencies in the world. But I started justifying keeping them, which is like, they get me auditions for movies. I now have a rule that if I justify keeping something in my life, I have to let go of it. Because, I have a 4-year-old daughter. I've never been like, well, she gets good medical, so I'll let her keep being my daughter. I have no part of me that justifies the things that are part of my soul's calling. I would never justify why I do this for a living. But whenever you're like, it's a pretty good job, but I'm not that into it, but I will get a raise soon. The guy is kind of a jerk, but he took me to a nice dinner once. These are your mind explaining why you're ignoring your heart. Right. So we have this, what is that? We have this higher calling. So I felt like, even though it's one of the biggest agencies in the world, I'm going to let go of it. So I told them I'm dropping you. And they were like, no one drops us. And I was like, I know this doesn't make sense. It's a spiritual thing. I have to follow my soul. I let go of them. Right after that, I get this call from a group called GATE. It stands for Global Alliance of Transformational Entertainers. Apparently, Jim Carrey and Eckhart Tolle had combined forces and created an event together. I mean, that is the most Jim Carrey and Eckhart Tolle. People often had said, I'm what would happen if Jim Carrey and Eckhart Tolle had a baby. And then they call me. And it felt like, and it could have just been a coincidence, but it felt like the vibrational reward for trusting and following, letting go of motivation, letting go of stand-up, letting go of the agency, and getting just clear with my soul. So I'm not just following what I should do according to patterns or other people, what would be the right thing, or how can I get more? I'm here to know what I am. And in the last couple of years, my rule with myself is my intention fully is to know what I am. And no matter what's happening, moves with that intention. So you're having an off day. Oh, I'm here to know what I am. I get present. I meditate towards it. It's not to make as much money or be a #1 speaker or even impact as many people as possible. It's to know what I am. And the byproduct is I'll share it. Right.
And that's really what your second book is talking about, the illusion of money. By pushing to make that money, you're pushing it away. And I thought it was brilliant. Each of the chapters has powerful exercise. I recommend anybody watching go and check that book out, because it comes from the idea of prosperity from a completely different angle than you might be used to with other books in that genre. So you explain kind of what happened. You by letting go, you started making more money from these other gigs. And it is a change. There's a change now happening, in my opinion, from what I can see in our relationship with money in this new sort of third density to fourth density environment. Like you even mentioned that in a recent video. Talk to me a little bit about that. Our relationship spiritually has changed. We can still be prosperous, but we have to go about it vibrationally in a different way.
Yes, there's been this amazing, that was accurate for its time, this hustle culture and make it happen and achievement thing.
Right.
Right? And it's so big and it serves such a purpose. I really believe something kind of crazy. I believe that 2012 was the beginning of Source actually taking over our destiny. And I believe that now you'll notice that we all have this pattern. There's a lot of people that are like, should I do this? And a lot of people in this energy of, I'm going to start this thing, and it always fizzles out.
Right.
Because that should voice is the egoic pattern that you created a long time ago that used to actually work, right? Like, I'm going to create this thing in the 90s was a successful thing because at the time it was a calling, that was a calling for you in this other frequency. Now imagine that there's a destiny that you don't quite know what it is, but there's just this timeline that's unfolding and it's picking you up. And that should energy that's always trying to get things. It's so much more about achieving things, right? It's dying. And so people are now being put in a position where your only way to grow is in a letting go frequency, in a surrendering, and almost a giving up frequency, because all our pain is this still motivational frequency that's trying to happen in a non-motivational world now. And the things that are trying to happen are, you'll notice that should energy usually comes. In the last 2 years, I did over 1,200 one-on-ones, and I've learned something. That should energy always comes from a fear of something. I need to create a business. And I always say, what happens if you don't? And there's a pattern in their body. If I don't, I'll be abandoned by my dad. If I don't make enough money, so I have to egoically force money to happen. If I don't, my dad will say that I'm unworthy. Like, it's a tie of like the biggest trauma in your childhood. Anyone that already is trying to create some arbitrary goal that doesn't feel like a calling, but is like some should, that you have some universe that's shoulding you, which is not the universe, right? It's just loving you. If you have that in you, you'll notice that if I say to you, even people that say, I got to get my voice out. If I say to you, okay, from that frequency, I'm not saying don't get your voice out, but from that frequency, if I say to you, what happens if you don't? You'll notice it goes into either a traumatic wall of an I don't know, or some kind of, I will be abandoned. I won't be loved. I'll be abused again. I'll be shamed. My mom will say, I told you so. My dad won't love me. This is all involved in what's running your decision. And that's why it won't be successful. You're trying to avoid fear. And what really you could do is say to the pain, instead of saying, I'm going to make that business happen as a way to avoid the fear of abandonment, say to the pain, this is how you deal with it. Whatever it is, you're allowed to be abandoned in my body.
Right.
And you watch as that you realize this pain is actually an inner child from your past that has never been healed. And you are the one who's sitting here as the new parent of that child. And the what you've done is, in the past, every time it says, I'm scared of being unloved, you're trying to fix it by getting love on the external. Now, I want you to picture if my 4-year-old daughter said, I'm worried no one loves me, how weird it would be if I ran out of the room and I tried to get the neighbors to like her. Like, I was like, watch her tap dance and look at her, that's what we're doing to our inner children. We're fixing it on the external. So we're actually abandoning the inner child.
Right.
The inner child goes, I'm scared I'll be lonely. I'll be alone, but it's not talking about other people. It's talking about that you now keep avoiding it by building your thing that isn't sustainable.
I see it all. People are creating and choosing their goals based on what they fear. I don't want that debt. I don't want to lose this relationship. No, I don't want to get sick. And so it's always from that place. You're never going to be aligned to what you truly, your soul will vibrate at the highest level, like you talk about.
And can you see how in like 2005, 2006, like when The Secret came out, that was a consciousness that really was like, just don't think about debt. Think about,
just forget about it.
Yeah. And
Right.
So you're sitting there, we actually were at a shrunken consciousness more that did like actually help you somehow forget you had debt and focus only on what you want. But the fear of debt isn't even the fear of debt. It's some deeper thing. I've really seen I can't find a person that has that I can't get to something under it. Like there's always something under it. Then I won't be enough. Then I will be, and it's not even external things. Then everyone will hate me. It's like, then I won't be enough. Then I will be beaten again. Like your body's literally, if your dad hit you once or something, your body's literally making life decisions now, even if your dad's dead, from like, don't feel that.
It's so true. I mean, there was a time when I was a kid, I think we were at like the fair, and my parents, we got lost, and I got so scared. I couldn't find my parents. I felt abandoned. I felt that in my body. And I had to figure out, a lot of times my abandonment issues came from this little moment in time when I was scared my parents had abandoned me, and I was afraid I didn't want to have that feeling, right?
And then what did you create to make sure? See, like once the body has that, it kicks in some mechanism that goes, we need to never feel that again. So whether it's you always stayed close to your parents, or over explained yourself where you're going so you didn't get abandoned. Dude, I have the same thing. I didn't have, like I'll tell people way too much. Like we'll be at a restaurant, I'll be like, I'm gonna go pee now. Like they think I'm just gonna leave them in the middle of lunch.
I get it totally.
But like I'm over making sure, because it's that I don't want to be abandoned again. I don't want to feel abandoned. I have the same thing. My mom came to pick me up from school once when I was a little kid. I was sick. And when she came in, I went to the bathroom. So when she walked into the nurse's office, the nurse said, oh, he must have left. So then she left. I came out of the nurse's office, out of the bathroom, and they go, oh, we just told your mom that we thought you left, so she's leaving. Cut to me running out to the parking lot, just seeing the brake lights, and always just, you know what I mean?
Right.
That has been a trauma that had been in my body that I have spent the last 10 years continually releasing and crying out. But the shadow to that is me feeling traumatized if a girlfriend from the past doesn't show up at the thing when she said she, because it's my mom, right? Like, and me thinking I'm not loved anymore, right?
And the amazing thing about these stories is it can be a moment in time of a couple of minutes. We're not talking about a regular, it can be something that you may not even remember. That happened over just a very short period of time that locks itself into your neurology.
And it's, what's amazing too is how much I've learned. It's often not a thing you'd think was some grandiose thing.
Right.
It literally was like the weird way they looked away, or whatever. And it's just, if your body had a traumatic moment, you don't even have to. Yeah. It's really weird because it's not always some giant grandiose thing.
No.
It could be just you saw someone turn their head weird, or, just the way they were just doing their own thing, or they looked down while you were talking. And, so it's inevitable that every person right now has tons of trauma in their body, even if and then there's things where people feel they don't deserve to feel their trauma because someone has it worse than them. Right. So this has to stop, because no matter what, wherever you are, no matter what, we have deep trauma in our body. And we aren't here to make sure that, we're avoiding it because other people have it worse. In fact, many people are making sure everyone else is okay, which is great, but they're doing it in a way to avoid their trauma. And this is what has created a bunch of people pleasers and everything. And that's awesome if you're out to help people. I totally believe in that. But right now, one of the things that I've noticed that empathetic people especially do is they use spirituality to be like, I totally get why my parents did what they did. And that's true. There is that total element, but you're using that to not look at what it felt like to be you. And we still have to honor that's true, but you felt abandoned. You felt unloved in that moment. And then you heal the other side with them. But empaths have been really good at understanding the other side so they don't at all. And that's created this ton of people pleasers thing. But what's amazing in this time is all of our collective trauma is coming to the surface. The difference is if you know this is what's happening or not. So we're doing this call right now to bring awareness to the fact that if you're feeling off every other day and then feeling totally free or having moments of God or crying something out and going, what's wrong with me? Nothing. You are ascending, you are expanding, and you are healing those wounds. And you'll notice life is different right after that, right? So if you understand that, that's what's happening. If you don't, you just feel lots of pain and you're going to get addicted to everything. So you're either going to go down and become look at this, get more and more addicted, get on more and more pills, blame everything else, or you're going to go inward more and bring more and more light to yourself. And that, in my opinion, is the two earths,
That's
right?
it. Yeah.
It's the literal shove down of all of yourself. And those people that will not talk openly about feelings and are just like, no, and are full blame and live on the news 20 hours a day. And then you have the people that are like getting open. What is this bringing up for me? And I'm at a place where I'm like, what is everything bringing up for me? Like, what is Russia bringing up for me? What is,
there's a collective inner child beyond just our body there. And I think that's what the Russia thing is. It's the collective inner child that's being brought up. We're having memories of hiding under our desks when we were kids, right? And it's beyond, it's bringing up a lot of stuff, right?
Yeah. And there isn't, like, it's weird because I started really thinking about it. Like, what if, I'm sure you've had a lot of talks about or thoughts about if this is a simulator or if we're in some kind of virtual reality.
Right.
Thing. If it is, and I've healed many wounds in the inner me that have helped me to achieve higher, write books, move to a higher creative space and flow, wouldn't a major next step for my evolving in the simulator to notice how external world events trigger me too? And heal the wounds? Like, what if that also is me? What if literally Russia is me? Like, what if this is my dream? If this was a dream and you have Russia in your dream, every aspect of the dream is you.
Right.
And the you in the dream is actually a separate self because every character in your dream is contained within you.
Right.
What if this is the same thing?
So the exciting thing about following you is that I started noticing third density. You started dropping some law of one stuff. And, it's one of my passions. I could talk about that forever. I think it's fascinating. The Dolores Canon, the law of one, we're going through some sort of transition and the dynamics of what we understand as reality are changing. Yes. And I want to get your vibe on that. Density to me, now that I understand it more, is complexity. It seems like we're going through a greater level of complexity, but at the same time, we're realizing that we're each the same self. Yeah. So that I see you and me, and when I see somebody suffering anymore, it's me suffering. So it's a very personal thing, right? I wanted to get as you have learned this, what of your interpretation of the law of one? How has it changed your thinking?
And when you see someone suffering and you realize it's you suffering, you gotta heal that thing. I know we also need to be there for people if someone's about to get hit by a car, push them out of the way or whatever. But like, know that if you're emotionally triggered about someone else's experience, that's trying to show you something. That is how it works, right?
Right.
So it's showing you that. So a way that I see density is the energy that is more caught in the physical realm, that thinks that more money is better, that thinks that a relationship with a person, how to explain this the right way, that a relationship as being the answer. Like if there's an attachment-based relationship and there's a love-based relationship. A love-based relationship in my eyes is I'm whole, whether you're here or not. And you're whole. And we add to each other. An attachment-based relationship is I can't function if you leave. I'm in total loss. Now you're using a relationship to avoid aloneness or loneliness or whatever, because that was a traumatic thing in your childhood. That feels physically denser. That's a heavier energy, right? Like you can feel the energy that's always in the future or the past. It's actually heavier. It has a heavier density to it. It's stuck on the ground. It's not getting higher frequency things because it's always in the fear of what if, and then it's creating a solution to the what if, which actually strengthens the what if. Like if you're scared you'll be broke and then you make a bunch of money out of that fear, you're actually strengthening the fear because it ran that, even if you got the money, right?
Very good point.
But that's a very heavy, dense thing, right? Mm-hmm. And when you get more here, you'll notice there's always often I'm getting more and more here. I'm in the woods a lot more. I'm releasing a lot of things that felt dense, that felt like attachment-based connections, that felt like, I am what I do. There's a heaviness to that. Even my biggest accomplishments, that's me, that takes me away from here, and it feels like a backpack, and the trauma feels like a backpack, and that heaviness. So that's a heavier density, right? And as you cry those things out, everything you cry out, every trauma you cry out, it's always replaced by something. And I notice with every client I work with, when they have this thing, like this is like many one-on-ones for me. They'll be talking about this trigger they're in. I'm so annoyed about this thing. I'm trying to figure out what to do about my job. I had a dude yesterday. I'm trying to figure out what to do with my job, and I could feel instantly. He said he didn't like his job. And I felt like this was not about him leaving his job. It felt like he always needs to escape. And what he doesn't like about the job is it's steady. And he has an escape pattern going because he has a fear of just everything being okay in his body, right? And so he's always had, in his childhood, he had to escape trauma and everything. And when everything's okay, his escaper has no job. So he doesn't like his job because his pattern can't escape anywhere. So instead of getting out of the job, we got to look at this thing. And I watched him then cry for about 10 minutes straight, because he realized the inside of his body is trying to talk to him and he's always escaping it. And so he felt for this inner child that feels this like, you're always running from me. And then we went into this work where his dad always abandoned him. His dad was always escaping too. He's always escaping present moments with him. And this kid felt in his body, life is escaping. And then then he goes, then later in the call, he goes, I feel like I'm keeping everything together. And I said, what if you let everything fall apart? And he goes, I can't. And I said, what would happen if you let everything fall apart? And he just starts crying. He goes, everyone will get hurt. And then some other childhood pattern came out, right? And then every time he cried out, you would hear peace. I felt peace. I felt like he was releasing, even though it was all in his body. Our collective suitcase fell out.
Yeah.
Like I felt like,
I know what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. Like when he cried that out, I didn't realize I was also carrying that suitcase.
Yeah. I'm having these healing conversations like that. And it's always something in me too. When I'm, like you're saying, I'm healing something in me through them. And I can feel it. I know that I had these sort of interactions before, trying to help friends out. It was never as intense. That density that we're going through is a releasing, but it's also, there's some sort of group mind interaction happening at the same time that is a dynamic of it that makes it very unique.
I would also say a way I see the densities is there's different laws for the third and the fourth density, right? Like
yes,
third density is you are what you achieve, you are your relationship. Guilt exists in the third density and doesn't in the fourth. Like I believe the opposite of guilt is forgiveness. And I believe that you're always forgiven. You just have to find it and receive it. Right. So if we're feeling guilt about a past thing, it's definitely, and it keeps staying there. Sometimes people are choosing that versus healing it. And what you don't get is when you forgive it, then those energies don't do that anymore. But guilt is actually keeping you in the same frequency that does the same stuff. Same with regret. In fact, a lot of people right now are making a lot of decisions out of don't regret. Right. So these are in the laws of third density. Regret matters, right? You believe regret's a thing. In the fourth density, you're just making decisions. You're always choosing a new life and you don't know the specifics about the life you didn't have, right? Everyone's like, that's regretting. Like, I wish I'd stayed with that person. You don't know if you would have gotten a car accident in the first week with that person. You don't know anything about it, right? So in the laws of third density, you are so much more about what you do. You are the avoidance of these patterns, right? In the laws of fourth, your love not based on a relationship, your love not based on accomplishment or how much is in the bank. Those things are all, they can be byproducts, but there's literally almost, if not zero, attachment to it, right? Like,
so well said. Yes, absolutely. And there's also a creative aspect to it. if I was to compare the two densities, if I'm painting in what I feel like in a fourth density energy, it's just pure flow. I'm in connection to source. Before it was, I'm achieving this, I'm painting this because I'm trying to achieve. But now it's just, I want to create. It gives me such joy. I could care less if anybody ever sees it. Right.
The outcome drives the reason in third density, right?
Right.
And when I'm done with this painting, I'll impress someone. And when I'm done with this painting, I'll get love.
Right.
So by the way, in third density, that always implies you're in lack. You need to get love because that'll fill something that's empty.
Right.
Right. So third density is a constant given, you're in lack. And so third density is full of what do I do out of the avoidance of what do I not want to feel again. Fourth density is only about this kind of constant, ongoing, more present expansion. Like if I asked anyone watching this right now, what would expand you, right? Like what in this time would expand you? And you bring nothing to consider into it, right? Like you can't be like, it would expand me, but I got to pay the bills. It would expand me, but blah, blah, blah. What you don't get is when you follow the expansion, those other things will collapse, but they were third density things and a much higher frequency that would probably pay the bills. And you'd probably have 80% less bills because many of the bills you have are addictions that you're keeping to keep the third density false you alive, right? In the fourth density, you have much less bills because God doesn't want you to do expensive things. It doesn't want you going clubbing. It wants you to expand. It wants
It's more fun just to go hiking in the forest. I don't need to spend a single dime, right? It's so true. So
you have less things too. You're not what you own. You don't care about how, flashy the house is or whatever. You're just now.
But it's a constant unfolding of I'm learning every second. It's before I was, learning little lessons every day, but it feels like it's an accelerated constant learning and discovery going on. And it seems like it gets more and more every day. Right.
And isn't it trippy to think it's taking you to the truth of what you've always been? You've just never experienced
I'm returning, right?
Yeah. Yes, because it is. In this time, especially like right now, dude, it is so exponentially fast.
It is.
And we are all in a position where no external answer will do the trick, right? Like you can feel that's what I am. That passes right through. So you have to start to really fall in love with a constant unknown to the mind. It's the death of the mind too. The structured mind of the story of you. So you first of all, you fall in love with, I don't know, but you can feel that you're following an expansion that you can feel, but would make no sense to anything. A thing that a lot of people say when they work with me is I'm confused. And I immediately make them say, you're allowed to be confused in my body, because it's a pattern that needs to make sense out of everything going on, which means the pattern's going to shove it into what it's seen before. Do you get what I mean by that? Like the pattern you can only make sense or wrap your mind around it by shoving it into what made sense to you in the past.
Yeah.
But you cannot make sense mentally or understand egoically the vastness of what the hell you are or what's happening to you.
It's the law of confusion almost. Just assume I'm not going to know, but I'm going to feel my way through this. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Like that's trying to happen. Your own freedom. And what's falling off are the shackles of the characters that you've played, and the healing and the atonement and the forgiveness of all the stuff that you did and all the stuff that happened to you, because all of our pain is we just don't know the whole story. Like you don't know the whole story. That's why, by the way, as a side note, that's why The Joker is a fascinating movie, because it actually got you empathetic to a murderer.
Right. It's true. It's a great point. Yeah. I think if you showed a movie of every murderer, there might be a little bit of empathy. That's the beauty of, just reading not fiction. You start to realize there's a story behind everything, and there's some empathy behind it, even the worst character, right?
Yes. If you started literally on the biography of the real story of what was happening to him and what was going on in their mind of like Jeffrey Dahmer or Hitler or something like that, you'd have empathy. And who knows, maybe from there you'd hold a frequency that they'd have that empathy for themselves. And this is why I believe very much we can end the control factors, because they're only doing it because of their own trauma too.
Right.
The things that are doing that are not willing to look at themselves, and many of them are moving. I know that there's also possibly different, literally different, like, are they reptilian or something?
Right. There's all that, but
yeah.
So I wanted to, before we go, I wanted to mention that you had it's a course that you're offering, or on the April 23rd and the 24th.
Yes.
And I can go to kylesees.com. It's free with the membership, right?
So I came up with a goal to create the most content possible and create the most impact and charge almost nothing. Right. So I created this thing called the Absolutely Everything Pass, and it's $29 a month. Anyone can cancel anytime. And it has all of my past events that we used to charge thousands for. I do a live event on Sunday with a guided meditation and talk, and it's called Exploring Oneness on Sundays. Mm-hmm. On Mondays, the team hosts a meditation. We have an exercise on Tuesday night called It's Totally Possible, where you riff into a frequency of it's totally possible, and it's insanely life-changing. On Wednesday, I do a call where I answer questions, and there's this community there, and it's so awesome. On Thursday, one of our amazing teammates is a major breathwork coach, and he holds breathwork sessions for people, both individually on the call and people that just did my call the night before. So they have these experiences where he helps them meditate on what I had just said. And this is an ongoing thing. And we've now added free 2-day, full day events every 3 months to the Absolutely Everything Pass. So April 23rd and 24th is an event called Magic Money. And my focus is on the release of the old you and looking at what's going on in the world with, you're hearing that the economy is going to collapse and all these different things, right? Inflation's through the roof. 80% of all of our money was printed in the last 2 years. I don't know if you know that, but and this is amazing to me, because a new thing I'm thinking about is it's time to abandon the dollar, our attachment to money, our thinking of when my bank account is big, then I'm the thing, because it's abandoning you right now. It's starting to get worth less and less. And you can replace it with gold, with your soul, with meditation, with nature. And what if what's going on right now is life is trying to get you to shed the old patterns, right? And the old story of what you are. And it's making things like, I don't know, if you have a habitual addiction to lattes, it's making them more expensive, because those things are also maybe screwing with your nervous system and cutting off the higher version of you. And what if life is trying to get you to the ultimate version of you, to do the things that would expand your soul and, meditate and go hiking, as we said, and all of the old story of what you're not is dying. This Magic Money event is designed to help people through whatever chaos shows up in 2022 and 2023 to be spiritually prepared for it, because it's only our egos that are being triggered by all this, and it's only our fear that we haven't looked at. And what I'm here to do is bring that higher thing, and that's free with the Absolutely Everything Pass. So people watching this could sign up for the Absolutely Everything Pass now, do that event, do all the content on there. It's so good and it's so effective, and very few people cancel, if almost anyone, because they love it so much. And it's changing their lives, and it pays for itself over and over and over and over again. So it's you finding your soul, it's you giving permission. You watch people cry and release. It's an amazing community. We're supporting each other, and it's my favorite thing I'm doing now.
Awesome. Sounds fantastic. So kylesees.com. That's the best place to.
Also, absolutelyeverything.tv is
absolutely-everything.tv. Well, Kyle, thank you so much. I have a feeling that we could probably sit and talk for another 3 or 4 hours.
I'm always here if you want.
I appreciate you giving me your time, and thank you for so much that you've done in helping me to follow my heart. It means a lot. It's a big service that you've done for me. And I know I'm speaking for a lot of other people too. So welcome to the Reality Revolution, Kyle.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you so much.